Children's literature is getting more inclusive thanks to the efforts of two self-published authors from Dorchester to tell us about the creation of More Than a Princess and Stacey Became a Frog One Day are the authors Delanda Coleman and Candelaria Norma Silva. Thank you both very much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
I want to start with Delanda because in both cases here, we're talking about first books, which makes you sound like beginners, but these books didn't come out of nowhere. So Delanda, where did your book come from?
Well, it came from two burning needs. One is that I am a career professional in the technology sector, and I realized that there was, as many of us know, a lack of diversity within the technology field. And then the second inspiration, of course, was the birth of my daughter. And when she was born, I just had a desire to, set her up for success. And I think literacy is definitely a key angle to that. So I had this idea of developing content because I couldn't find content that express women of color and in STEM-based careers. And so I decided to create one.
Well, what I'm reading between the lines here is that you have a daughter who, unlike her mother, wanted to be a princess.
Yes, that was another issue that we had. She was obsessed with two things, unicorns and princesses. And once I said, well, if I can't change her mind about being a princess, I could at least tell her what all the things that princesses grow up to do when they become queens. They actually become, they could be designers, they could be architects, astronauts, doctors, engineers. Princesses do awesome things. And I just really wanted to own the concept of being a princess and help her, really shape what she could do, other than just being pretty and polite and kind.
Candelaria, you certainly have some professional background, but you also have this life experience growing up with books, reading books to kids. So between all of those, what got you going?
Well, I've been writing children's stories for a long time, and I actually had stories published in a publication called Ebony Junior, which was published by Johnson Publishing Company. They accepted, and it's actually on my website. I scanned it in, and I was published in a Dictopedia. I had a Third World Children's Book and Film Festival years ago at the Harriet Tubman House, where we brought in multicultural writers, but this was in the early 80s. And then I would try to get an agent and go back and forth, and then life would catch up with me and I do other things. So for many years, I've been pushing the writing and the cultural works of other people with the Roxbury Film Festival and all the things that that I did professionally. And at home, I'd be writing and putting the manuscripts away. So what happened was, it was a desire. I met Delanda about a month or so before COVID, because one of the programs that I managed had piano classes, and her daughter was the last student admitted to the piano classes before what ended up happening. And while we were waiting on her daughter, while she was in lessons, we were sitting in a room and she said, "Oh, let me show you this book I published." And I looked at it and I read it and it was so beautiful. And I said, I've always wanted to get one of my books published. She says, "I can help you with that." So I said, sure, and gave her my information. And, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking I might not hear from her again. And in fact, it was about 2 weeks, but she had gone out of town. I didn't realize. And then she got back to me and pitched, different ways that she could help me with it. And I was able to hire her to be the project manager. And so she made my dream come true. And I like to write childhood is a time of joy to me. And I like to write stories that are very based in Black culture, which is a culture that I'm from, but that it's not knocking you over the head. You don't have to, because you're immersed in the culture. And so just joy and a child. And I remember my daughter, my son, my grandchildren have said at different times, "No, Grandy, I'm not Tommy today. I'm not Sage today. I'm a cat." And then, so that was sort of what got me started on writing this particular story.
Now, in your case, this is writing that you did at least partially during the pandemic. Given all the rearrangements of our schedules that brought about, did that matter to you with this book?
Oh, very much so. I was furloughed from a job that took up a lot of time, and I wasn't officially furloughed for another one, but because I run programs and no programs they didn't want to do them virtually, we couldn't announce a new round of grants to do programming. I suddenly had this free time. And so in my mind, I said, okay, the universe has delivered time for you, and it's delivered a project manager, because it's interesting. I can project manage for other people, but it's very hard for me to project manage myself as a writer, because I have all my fears and, oh, it's not good enough, and I go back and forth. So having someone to give me deadlines and to cheerlead, and then having the gift of time and being in the luxury that I'm not, I found out I wasn't essential, Chris. I'm not an essential worker. So I have a computer, I had the ability to just spend the time. And it's funny, you can write a manuscript as an idea, but when you're really bringing it to a book and you've got to give it to an illustrator, for me, it made the story more real than it had ever been, just as writing it. So yeah, the time helped a lot.
Delanda, speaking of essential people, you had some help in this book. You had a co-author, your husband, and your daughter is a sort of a marketer. Tell us a little bit about their contributions.
Yeah, well, my husband, when we were dating, he would often freestyle rap. That's the thing that him and his friends would do all the time, and they would subject me to listening to them. So fast forward to 10 years into our relationship, when we had the idea and I wanted it written, I had outlined everything that I wanted to happen in the scenes, but my husband, which I call the father of More Than a Princess, was the creative who can actually turn it into a rhyming picture book, a rhyming book, as opposed to writing it in prose. And so he was really critical in, just giving it that extra. I think rhyming books give it that extra, je ne sais quoi. It gave it that extra juice, and he was able to bring it to life through that. My daughter, on the other hand, when she saw, I would print out copies of the illustrations when they were, at first they were just line art, and I would print them out and mark them up. She would sneak copies of the book into her bag and take them to school and share with her classmates. And so unbeknownst to me, I was actually having small focus groups and test groups that were, reading and looking at the book, which was super helpful for me, because it was a big confidence booster. Because when I would go pick her up from school, the teacher was like, "We read your book today." And I was like, "What?" And they gave really good advice and insight into the whole process. And so now it's something that I'm intentional about as I write the second book, is making sure that I put it in front of kids, the readers and the consumers of the book.
Candelaria, your book is about a girl who goes through these metamorphoses into all different kinds of creatures. The frog, like in the title, it could be a pig or it could be a bird. I can imagine a parent reading this with a kid, and the parents reliving this. I mean, they're making animal noises, they're grunting and snorting. And is that how it's supposed to work?
Oh, definitely. And one of the things that I intend to do is put up some little instructional videos about how to read to your child, because children, when they're this age, for the picture book age, between like 2 and 5, they like repetition. So they're going to want to hear this story again and again and again. And as a parent or a grandparent, it can get kind of tiring. So what you want to do is have them say, "Okay, I think she becomes a car," and the kid will say, no, there's no cars in this book. Or what kind of sound does a pig make? And then, they can make the story come alive in many ways. I also want to say real quickly that my husband has been an absolute big booster for me, and he's been pushing me for years. We've even had a few arguments. Get one of these books published. Please do it. You have all this product. You have all these manuscripts. Do something with them. So now he's managing the inventory side of everything, and that's been very helpful.
Delanda, one of the other things that I was intrigued by when you were dealing with an editor was this advice about meter. Now, if you do freestyle rap, you know something about meter. But on the other hand, there's an important lesson here for making a book work. And what is that?
Yeah, so a meter is sort of the number of beats each line has. And so if you're ever reading a story, you want to make sure that each line has the same number of beats. And so it's kind of like a song when you're reading the book. So it's on rhythm. And you can actually, if you want to, turn it into a song and turn it into something a little bit more enjoyable. But if you're off meter or off beat, then it becomes difficult or exhausting or frustrating for the reader to read the book. And I think that's really important for parents who are reading a book, and they want to make sure that they have a sense of rhythm as they're turning the pages. And so, you know, we understood that in a practical sense, you know, when you're actually listening to music, but when you're actually writing, it's nice to have an independent third party actually point out that it isn't on meter, and give you a structure and give you ways to actually get it on meter.
Yeah, and for me, Chris, I had my granddaughter and some other people read it to me aloud, and I read it, my story aloud to make it sure it had the right mouth feel. Because again, that experience of you're going to be reading this book a lot, how do the words land so that someone who's not you, when they read it, will pick up the rhythm sort of from the way the words are placed.
And that's really how kids learn to talk and how to make sense out of language too, right?
Yes. Yes, very much. By repetition, by you responding. In fact, they say when babies babble, the important thing is for you to babble back and for you to acknowledge them or say something to them. Oh, what are you talking about? You're talking about the sun, whatever, because that way they know when I make these sounds, those sounds get a response. And so that's very important for parents to do with children.
Delanda, of course, the next level is how you market these books, how you engage with people and build community. Tell me what you've been doing on social media with that.
Well, first is just being transparent about the book writing process and letting people know, like, you know, how the book came to be, you know, what stage you are in the book development process. And then of course, when it's going to be available. But it's been sort of a sustained effort. Like once it's launched, you know, now the real work begins, you know, so getting opportunities to get in front of kids. I've done lots of virtual readings, showing up at, because I'm in the corporate space, I'm doing like take your kids to work day type activities, and where we're doing virtual book readings. So tomorrow I'm doing a book reading with my colleagues and their children and reading the book. So that's a great way to sort of market the book. The other things that I do is do coloring pages and activity books. So create ways that the kids can take the experience from the book and extend the experience. And so we take some of the concepts in the book and go a little bit deeper and give them writing prompts, coloring prompts, puzzles and games and activities so that they can be more engaged and the concepts within the book start to sink in a little bit more.
And Candelaria, what about you? In addition to you and Delanda both writing the next book already?
Yeah, Delanda did a great launch event for me. She has a Black and Brown book club, and so we had an online event where people came in. We did some giveaways and actually spun a wheel to select who would get for the raffle for the books. And I talked about the background of the book. I talked about our relationship, which I think is really magical, is two Black women really supporting each other. So we're not girls anymore, but we're Black women magic, I would say. And so so that's it. I do a lot of social media. My former colleagues at the Huntington and at other jobs I've worked, the Boston Public Library, there are a few of the libraries who are carrying it. And we're going to begin to do a series of, again, short video posts about this book and others and how to talk to children about the book and just really sharing the journey, maybe even doing something around what are the steps to create your own children's book and what the marketing piece. That's the piece that I tend to be a little bit more reluctant about. I really just love writing the books, and I hope to do some things virtually, maybe with Frugal Bookstore. One of the things that COVID has done is that a lot of the in-person sort of things that we might have done previously, we're not doing. So you have to do things in virtual space and figuring out how to do that and get people to come to those events, and what are there other bookstores that are doing virtual events? How do you get to their attention? You have a little bit of an uphill battle when you're independently published to get some of those things happening.
Finally, a brief and simple way for our viewers to find these books online, at least.
There are two ways. One is my website, CandelariaNormaSilva.com. You can order from me, but you can also order through Amazon and through Ingram Spark.
And Delanda, what about your book?
Yeah, you can find my book on my website at sydneyandcoleman.com. And you can also get it on Amazon and Walmart or barnesandnobles.com.
Well, thank you both very much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Okay, that was Delanda Coleman and Candelaria Norma Silva. We'll have more news in just a moment.